Hello there. It appears we've made it yet another day. Isn't that marvelous? Hopefully you all have been entertaining yourselves, and I do hope that you enjoyed our very wonderful director, Brandon Mitchell, and the Earl of Dudley Manor, Dudley himself. That was quite a treat, wasn't it? Brandon has been a terrific producing partner and a wonderful director, and I cannot sing his praises high enough. I'm excited for you all to see his directing abilities when The Duchess comes out. But until then, we'll just keep each other company, won't we? So, get comfortable. How are you doing? I mean, really, how are you doing? Go ahead and write me in the comments. I want to know. I think it's important that we check in with each other. And I think it's important that we do all that we can for self-care during this time. And whether you're spending this time working on projects and keeping busy, or lounging about and taking naps and watching TV, either way is fine. We all manage in different ways, and I know that I vacillated between the two. So, some days I lie in bed and watch nothing but Netflix, and the other days, well, I'm with you all, recording these, editing these, and checking in on the duchy. Now this week for self-care, I've stuck to the schedule of going to the park and exercising for about 45 minutes to an hour, a nice brisk walk through the park, about 3 miles almost. But before that, I'll do my French lesson for about 30 minutes. And then after my French lessons and my walk, well, there's other tasks to be done. I've taken a keen interest in cooking. I've always loved cooking, and cooking is a very wonderful way to relieve stress. It gets you manual with your hands, with the chopping and mixing and stirring or whatnot. And then after that, you've got something delicious to eat. I'm excited for what I'm to make next, although I don't know what it is, but I did try my hand at a quiche, and I figure I would try my hand at a galette. Hopefully a strawberry galette. Depends on what they have in season at the market. As always, I want to give a shout out to our healthcare workers. I was honored enough to be invited by Dr. Laura Myers to her online self-care class today, and it was wonderful to check in with others and see how they are doing and how they are managing. It has been a difficult transition, not only for healthcare workers, but also for teachers across the country, as they try and manage some way to continue lessons, even in this time where we are quite distant from each other. I tip my hats off to them, and also to the future educators who are still continuing to learn and implement ways that they can reach their students. I was also lucky enough to hear from a young nurse at Emory Hospital talking about the need for masks. Now, I ordered me a mask the other day from Costumes, etc., and it came in. But I'd like to ask, if you can, if you know of anyone who makes masks, that we are in need of 25 masks for this young lady and her team. I know that I can trust the Duchy to raise these. I trust you all very much. And I'll be doing my best to secure those masks. So if you have any leads, go ahead and write me in an email. Alright, so the last 2 chapters were read by Brandon. They were quite entertaining, weren't they? Something about a trial. How exciting. And now, we are at the conclusion of our journey. We are at chapter 12, titled, Alice's Evidence. And I think we shall begin, won't we? Here, cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen on the heads of the crowd below. And there they lay, sprawling about, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed, in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, For the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back in the jury box, or they would die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as she said so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that, in her haste, she had put the lizard in head downwards, and the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right. "Not that it signifies much," she said to herself. "I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other." As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and the slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. "That's very important," the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates, when the White Rabbit interrupted. "Unimportant, Your Majesty means, of course," he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. "Unimportant, of course I meant," the king hastily said, and went on to himself in an undertone. "Important, underimportant, unimportant, unimportant, important," as if he were trying which word sounded best. The jury wrote it down, important and some unimportant, and Alice could see this, as she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to herself. At this moment, the king, who had been for some time busily writing in his notebook, called out "Silence!" and read out from his book. "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court." Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There's more evidence to come yet, please your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "I haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter, written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "It isn't directed at all," said the White Rabbit. "In fact, there's nothing written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke, and added, "It isn't a letter at all. It's a set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked another of the jurymen. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit, "and that's the queerest thing about it." The jury all looked puzzled. "He must have imitated somebody else's hand," said the king. The jury all brightened up again. "Please, your majesty," said the knave, "I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end." "Well, if you didn't sign it," said the king, "that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man." There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first really clever thing the king had said that day. "That proves his guilt," said the queen. "It proves nothing of the sort," said Alice. "Why, you don't even know what they're about." "Read them." The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. "Where shall I begin, please your majesty?" he said. "Begin at the beginning," the king said gravely, "and go on till you come to the end, and then stop." These were the verses the White Rabbit read. "They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you?" Excuse me. "I gave her 1, they gave him 2, you gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free exactly as we were. My notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him and ourselves and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest between yourself and me. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So now let the jury, if any one of them can explain it, said Alice. She had grown so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him. I'll give him 6 pence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning to it. The jury all wrote down on their slates, she doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it, but none of them attempted to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, and as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know, he went on, spreading out the verses on his knee and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said. Which he certainly did not, being made entirely of cardboard. All right, so far, said the king to himself, and he went on muttering over the verses to himself. We know it to be true. Well, that's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what he did with the tops, But it goes on, they all return from him to you. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tots on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit, you never had fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen furiously, throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one finger, as he found it made no mark, but now he hastily began again, using the ink that was trickling down his face, as long as it lasted. Then the words don't fit you, said the king, looking round the court with a smile. There was a dead silence. It's a pun, the king added in an angry tone, and everyone laughed. Let the jury consider the verdict, the king said for about the 20th time that day. No, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having a sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this time the whole pack rose up into the air, and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank, with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees onto her face. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice, and she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of her that you have just been reading about. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear. But now run into your tea. It's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran. As well she might be. What a wonderful dream it had been. What a wonderful dream indeed. I hope you enjoyed myself and the others reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and hopefully it provided you a bit of comfort. Now that we've finished that, we shall begin a new book, shan't we? I'll leave that up to the surprise of next time. But in addition to the book, I just wanted to announce as well that the Duchess, that's me, I have a surprise coming for you all in the coming weeks. A way to come to you live. And I'm hoping that you'll sit down with me and have a cup of tea or coffee or water, if you will, what have you. And we'll just chat about your day, my day, what's going on, some self-care practices, and hopefully we'll also be entertained along the way. Maybe we can find some musicians that can play. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, my dear friends of the Duchy, and my Duchy itself, until next time, and remember, please stay safe and keep practicing social distance.